I was listening to an article the other day on the radio, and the station was giving something away free. And this guy said, I called 207 times before I ever got in. But he said, I won the tickets to the show that night. And he said, but I really had to seek after him. I really had to be aggressive, go after him. He said, I called 207 times. The things that the world has to offer sometimes seem like we'll really work after it. And we use those things one time and it's used up. And it's no longer, it's just used up. What my Savior gives you freely, you'll never use it up. There's so many different things that He gives in that. When He gives us freely, He gives us free salvation, free healing, all those things, all those gifts that goes with what God has got in store for us, all free. But yet we won't seek after those. Or seem like we seek after the things the world's got more. I just thought about that. I was just thinking about that. I said, how much that 207 times it would take to call just for one set of tickets to go somewhere or do something. Then you go and it's used up. God, you'll never use Him up. There's so many things we get in our life that we will use and we will ask God to help us in. He's always been there. He said, I'll go with you all the way. So it sounds to me like you ever get a partner, somebody's going to be there with you. All we have to do is accept Him for who He is. It ain't going to cost you nothing. He's already paid the price. Are you ready to hear a pastor tonight? Come on, Pastor.
Always gets me a little nervous when I look around and see the other preachers with their Bibles open. I'm wondering if God's given them a word and they need to jump up in front of me. And then I think, nah, probably not. As I was studying again on this message, I told Brother Ralph, I said, I got a big, long message, and I'm so excited. It's going to take hours. And I may have preached this already. As I was reading it, I thought, I believe I've done this before. But it might have been where I've studied it so much. So anyway, we're going to go to Revelation chapter 2. And we're going to start in verse number 12. And you all, please don't stop me if you've already heard it. I'm going to do it again anyway. I know we've already covered Ephesus and Smyrna, the two churches that that was the first two letters that he wrote. And this is the third letter in the book of Revelations, and it's to Pergamos. Pergamos. I want you to remember one thing real quick. The word Pergamos means married. It means married. So this city's name in itself means married, and it'll have an important here in a minute. To the angel of the church in Pergamos, these things saith he, which has the sharp sword with two edges. Wonder who that is. Any guessers? Anyone to take a stab at who that? Okay, we're going to go with Christ on that one. Verse 13. I know thy works. God knows your works. We got workers in here. And where thou dwellest. Now look here. Look at this church. Look at this church. Even where Satan's seat is. I got good news for everybody here. Satan's seat is not in Fort Gay. Nor is it in Louisa. It's not even in West Virginia or Kentucky. I don't believe it is. Do you? But he says he knew where. He's saying that Pergamos, he's considering that Satan's seat. I got to thinking as I heard Marcia's wonderful words, and I got to thinking as I was thinking about Sherry's day a couple days ago, and then I got to thinking about all the educators that we've got in this facility How many people work in the education system in here? Look at them. Look at them, guys. Look at them. Put your hand up, Aaron. You do that. Yeah, that's right. You know, I'm not talking about teachers. Work. There you go. Come on, girls. It's not just the teachers. It's the custodians. It's the secretaries. It's the electricians. It's the people that's working around these kids all the time. It's the ones that are coaching our kids and teaching our kids. They've got this huge responsibility. They've got to show Christ to a group of kids that probably have never seen Him before. I'm not saying all the kids that they deal with don't know anything about Christ. A lot of them are raised in godly homes. I get that. But a lot of them are not. And you talk about living and being, you see, not only do they have a bunch of kids, it's all right for just a minute, not only do they have a bunch of kids that probably don't know a lot about what they're showing them and teaching them, because I guarantee you, every one of these sneak a little bit of Christ in there every time they can. Not only do they not know much about it, but we've got a school system that's against them. It ain't like the school systems around the nation are pro-Christ or pro-God. They're in a place that's tough to start with, teaching a bunch of kids that don't know what they're talking about, but yet they can see the love of God in them, and it makes a difference. I want my children and my grandchildren to be highly educated. Don't you? I want our teachers to do their jobs. But above all, I want them to know Jesus. Above all, I want them to know Jesus. And as I was reading and studying on this, and I just know what these educators go through. I know just a little bit. I got to thinking about this church. This church is planted in the midst of Satan's seat. Do you think that's just an exaggeration that God wanted to stick in there? Are you alive this evening? Are you breathing out there? Is anybody breathing out? Okay, I want to make sure you're still out there. I believe he's literal here. And I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. We're going to read the rest of this one. I'm going to stop right here. And thou hast holdest fast my name and has not denied my faith. My goodness, this is good. Even in those days wherein Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was slain among you, where Satan dwells. Whew. Oh, it's just saying that. No, that's where he's at this time. I'm not saying that's where he's at right now. By the way, Pergamos, which was a huge city, and we're going to get into that in just a minute, is not there now. There's just a little small village there now. But at this time, it was the capital of Asia that had just came under Roman rule. It would be like London or New York or Paris or Berlin or some of the major cities. That's what this was. Pergamos was huge. But guess what else was at Pergamos? Are y'all ready for just a little bit of history on this to see where Satan's seat at? They had 3 of the largest temples for false gods in the entire world. They had a temple and a statue of Zeus. Who knows who Zeus is? Do you really know who it is? Big Daddy of the Greek gods. He's the big gun. 100 feet above the city on the cliffs was this huge temple unto Zeus and a huge statue of him. Just on the other side of that is this huge temple to the Greek goddess Athena. Just outside of the city is this huge temple. You'll love this one. I'm not going to explain his name because I can't pronounce it, but it starts with an A, and he's the big healing god of Greek mythology, and he's a snake man. Whew, you're bored to death, but that's all right. You're going to hear the rest of it. This is big. Inside the city are 3 large temples simply for Caesar worship. Caesar's ruling the place by now. Rome's in charge. Caesar's the big gun at Rome. They had temples, 3 of them in this city, just to worship Caesar as God. Are you getting the picture here? Everybody in the city one time out of the year, had to go into one of the temples of Caesar and take a pinch of incense and put it on the fire and say that Caesar is God. And if you didn't, it's tough here in Fort Gay, ain't it? Man, I tell you, we're just so oppressed all around us. That's what they had in the middle of that church, in the middle of that city, was a church. And Jesus says, I know your works. I know how you've kept hold fast of my name, and I also know that you've kept my faith. In the midst of all this, and it's everywhere. Remember the temple I told you about how many of you ever seen on the side of an ambulance that pole and that snake coming up around it? Guess where it came from? Satan's seat. Now they probably got it off of Moses, who put it up on a standard. But in this can I bore you just a second more? In this temple where people would come from all over the world, because it was the healing temple in the world, they would come, and whatever ailment there was, this is what they would do. They would go into this huge temple, and they would lay on the ground, because the whole temple was full of snakes. And if just perhaps one of the snakes would crawl over you that night while you were asleep, then you'd be healed. Who wants to sign up? I'll keep the cancer. Don't worry about it. You say that's just a bunch of... No, that's what was going on here. And in the middle of all that, there's a church. And it ain't just a church that's just barely holding on. It's a church that's keeping the faith. It's a church that's keeping His name. Do you know what Antipas means? Instead of all. You remember in Smyrna church, we talked about all the martyrs that happened during that time period. Okay, all that time there's martyrs by the thousands. And he commends Smyrna. He never has anything against Smyrna. He never says anything about them other than he brags on them. And they were the most persecuted time in the history. They were more martyrs during that 200-year span than any other time in history. But the church prevailed. Listen to this. I got to just go ahead and give it as it comes. The church prevailed through all the sufferings, through all the martyrs, no matter how hard it got. But guess what happened? Oh, goodness gracious. This is the church. What did I tell you Pergamos meant? Married. Guess what happens? Guess what's happened? This, if we go back to the time frame, it's about 313 BC. About that time, there's a man by the name of Constantine rises into power and becomes Caesar of all Rome. Guess what Constantine does? He sees in a vision a beautiful cross. And words under it says, by this conquer. He takes it as a sign from God that he is supposed to have Christianity to be the national religion. So at that moment, 313 AD, the church gets married to the state. He's the ruler of all government, and now he makes Christianity his religion. You don't have to be saved, you just got to get baptized. He made, provoked, ordered tens of thousands to be baptized at one time. No longer were Christians martyred and killed. They're the religion of the day. Is this making any sense? Pergamos, married now with the church and the state, and it seems like there's peace and harmony and everything's going just fine. We're not martyred anymore. We're not killed anymore. We've got it good now. Satan had tried for 300 years to stamp out Christianity by force and by brutality and by murder. And it only made the church grow Evermore. Every time a martyr got killed, 2 rose up in his place. But when the suffering stopped, you see, Satan will try anything. You see, if he finds out that the more you're persecuted, the stronger you get, he'll start making it easy for you. Oh, you're fine. Easy for you. I tell you what, you're doing so good. You're doing so good right now. Take a couple weeks off of church and go enjoy yourself. Because God wants you to spend time with your family. You go enjoy yourself. I was doing good up to then, wasn't I? Make it easy on yourself. I'll tell you what else. I'll tell you something else about God. This is what Satan will try to do. God is a God of love, and a God of grace, and a God of mercy. Don't worry. Chill out. Yeah, you messed up. Yeah, I know you got a little grudge against so-and-so. I know your tongue got out of line a little bit, and I get it. You're gossiping, but really you're just gossiping so that you all can pray for one another in agreement. Just let me tell you what so-and-so's doing so that we can come in agreement and pray for them. And Satan the whole time saying, yeah, that's right. Pray hard for them. You see, that's the ones he tries to get hold of that are growing when persecution comes. Now, if persecution is keeping you down and you're miserable and you're hateful and nothing ever is good because everything is just going wrong in your life, then he'll just keep piling on. But you start showing God in the middle of all your sufferings and all your persecutions and all the stuff that's coming. You show Satan that you're getting bigger, stronger, better, and ready more for the fight. He'll stop for a while. That ain't no good preaching, is it? No. This church is getting ready to go into a time when Satan's trying to lull them to sleep. Ain't no more suffering now. You got it made. It's a church that's compromised. Now, this church starting out, it's great. Let me go. You see, in Pergamos, anybody ever heard of the word parchment? Paul says later on, he says, bring me the cloak and especially the books and the parchments. Parchments is, do anybody know what parchments is? It's what they used to write on. That's right, they made it out of animal skins. First time ever parchment was ever created or ever made was in Pergamos. Actually, the root word of Pergamos is the same as parchment. Do you know the reason was? They had a library in Pergamos that had 20,000 books, which don't seem a lot to me and you today, but they had to handwrite every book. 20,000. The only other library even close to it, which was actually bigger, was in Alexandria, in Africa. And it's the biggest one in the world at this time, with hundreds of thousands of books. But Pergamos was so big and so intellectual and so worldly that they would get their papyrus. Anybody know what papyrus is? Paper. That's what they wrote it on before. They would get it from Alexandria. But because they got so big, Alexandria quit sending it to them. So they had to start making it themselves. And they invented parchment. And they began to write. And they begin to have intellectuals. And they begin to have colleges. And they begin to teach people all the wisdom of the world. But everything else started going down. See, the wisdom of the world, according to the New Testament, is what? Foolishness to God. Foolishness to God. Here they are with every idol in the world. Here they are with all the books and all the learning. I've already told you, I want to learn all I can. I do. I love knowledge, but not at the expense of the Spirit. We can't have legalism without spiritualism. They come together and they become religion. Good religion, not, oh my goodness. I know I'm boring. I get it. He's boring me to death. Okay, where am I at? Verse number 13. Let's stay right there. Y'all want to go back to the snake-filled healing place for a minute? Anybody here afraid of snakes? I'm scared of them suckers, ain't you? I really am. I don't care if it's a green, black, yellow, pink. I don't care if it's on a coloring book. I won't color the things. You know what I'm saying? I got grandkids, so I... It was a huge building, and they would come from miles and miles. And I thought about what Pastor Kurt said there about calling 207 times. We'll do everything in our power to fix something. We won't go to this place, but we'll do everything in our power. And they would too. They would come from miles and miles and miles and spend nights on an old cold floor to let a snake crawl across them. When they've got the healer of all healers, the great physician. They've got a building where people have faith and praise the name of God, and they've got an antidote for anything that ails them. But they'll turn to anything else. And that's why they've got all these things around there. And that's the reason we got all the things around us. We'll turn to anything before we'll turn to that. Can you imagine spending 24 hours on a rock with snakes all over you? And for some reason think that's going to heal me? You've got to be titched in the head. We've missed it somewhere. So here's Antipas, and what I was talking about Smyrna earlier, and I know I've jumped back and forth, and I don't mean to. Smyrna was always having martyrs, but now there's only one, and he's mentioned by name. Look what it calls him. My faithful martyr. Did you know that's the same thing in Revelation chapter 1 that they say about Jesus Christ? As we move on. Can we move to verse 14? But I have a few things against thee. So now I've laid it out there as hard and bad as I can. This church is sitting in the middle of where Satan's at. Ah, goodness, guys, we ain't got it that bad, Taylor. It's pretty easy where we're at. He said, I got a few things against you because thou hast them that hold the doctrine of Balaam. If y'all don't care, I'm only going to hold you about 10 more minutes. We probably won't get finished, but I'm going to hold you the whole time. But I have a few things against it because thou hast there them that hold the doctrine of Balaam. Everybody here know who Balaam is? If you do not know who Balaam is, please raise your hand. So everybody in here knows who Balaam is. If you don't know, raise your hand. Thank you. Thank you, because that means I can go on. I will read this, and then we're going to go back. Because thou hast there them that hold... Please look at every word, because God doesn't put nothing in there just so it can be in there. Them that hold the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed unto idols, and to commit fornication. Now, I just told you what was all around this beautiful church, and I just told you, or I didn't, but the Word just told us, well, who is the church? The church is holding fast the name of the Lord and holding fast the faith of Jesus Christ, right? But in the midst of that, even in the midst of this faithful bunch, there are those that hold the doctrine of Balaam. Balaam was a prophet that God used. But he was a greedy prophet. Balak, can I go just a minute here, since some of you didn't know? Balak has looked out across his land. He's a Midianite, and he looks across the land, and he sees Israel encamped about him, and he's afraid because he knows Israel's getting ready to come and get their land that God's promised them. So Balak calls for Balaam. Balaam, come here and curse Israel. Balaam says, I can't come if you give me half of your house full of silver, unless the Lord sends me. God said, don't go. So they sent other messengers. Balaam goes back to God and said, God, can I go? He said, if they come for you again, you can go. Well, he don't wait. He just gets up and goes out. And he's riding on his donkey. He's riding on his donkey to go curse Israel. And the donkey sees an angel of the Lord standing there with a big sword. And he's fixing to cut Balaam's head off. And the donkey swerves to miss it. And Balaam whoops him. kicks him, thumps him, and says, get back over. So they start going, and they're going through a garden, and there's a gate, and there's the angel standing. So Balaam again diverts it. This time, Balaam doesn't. The donkey diverts. Balaam don't see nothing. The donkey diverts and runs Balaam into a wall and crushes his leg. Balaam jumps out, starts kicking and beating the donkey, and the donkey starts talking to him. Is that wild? Why are you hitting me for, Balaam? You know what's even wilder? Balaam talks back. Like there's no big deal. What's the matter with you, you dumb beast? These 3 times you've run me into this wall. What is the matter with you? Haven't I been good to you all my life? Can you imagine a conversation going on with the donkey? And we just think nothing of it. Have you ever heard somebody say God can even use a donkey to preach? That's where they get it from. That and this front row. Exception of this side of this front row. The conversation goes on. And then the angel of the Lord appears unto Balaam and says, I'd have killed you if it wasn't for your donkey. He didn't apologize to the donkey either. I don't get that. But anyway, Balaam finally makes it to where he's looking out over Israel. We're getting to where it says the doctrine of Balaam. But I got to get you there, right? So Balaam gets up there, and he said, now you can see the whole territory, and you see Israel encamped about there. I need you to curse them. So he goes, and he does the incense and all this stuff, and God tells him to go back, and when he goes back, he starts blessing them. God won't curse His people. Can I get an amen? God wants to bless His people. Shoot. Balak said, I didn't bring you in here. He said, I told you when I got here that I'll only speak what God tells me to speak. Now, he's a greedy old prophet. He's a bad guy. But God is on him so much he can't but speak what God tells him to speak. 3 times he does this, and when he comes back, and finally he just blesses him, he said, look, that's all I could do. Now let me get to the doctrine of Balaam. After that, he goes to Balak, and he said, now look, I can't curse him. I can't curse him. God's blessed him. But I'll tell you what you can do. You can get your women to dress scantily and get them up in lines when the men come through. And you can lure them out. That's the doctrine of Balaam. The doctrine of Balaam is all about idolatry and adultery. And they put it in a package to where we don't recognize what it is. You think Satan just throws stuff out there? Obviously, no, he's subtle. That didn't help none, did it? Did that help any? That's the doctrine of Balaam. It's in the church today. It's in the church today. People are right now in the churches across the world. There are people in churches across the world, and more than likely in this building right now, or at least this church, that are trying to manipulate their way to a position that they want, or to a place they want, or to something they want. I know it wasn't shouting, but that's okay. We need to know. We need to be able to recognize when somebody is trying. Listen, if somebody is trying to coerce you or to move you in a way that you know that is not right or that is against somebody, that's a Balaam spirit. That's somebody trying to get you into idol worship or into adultery or adultery. There's two things that pulls people more than anything. Idol, which is pride, and sex, which is lust. We're all grown people in here. Let's just get real. What's the world throwing out there? And you don't think that it's touching into the church too? I don't get on Facebook. I'm getting ready to close. I told you I won't keep you very long. We ain't going to finish. I don't get on to social media very much. But anytime I punch up sermons. sermonindex.com. Boom. Punch it up, and here comes my sermons. But on the side of it is all kinds of pornography junk. It ain't pornography, but it might as well be. Some kind of ad or some kind of solicitation. Some kind of vulgar junk. They just look at me like I'm an idiot. That's okay. They pop up on your phones. Gosh, where'd that come from? Philip Lyons. He's not here. I'm going to kill him. We love fishing. So he's punching up fishing. And he just punch up some kind of, he writes it in there, some kind of, I don't remember what it was, fishing. And here comes women in bathing suits on your kayaks. He told me about it. I said, send me that site. And we do that. We've got...
Or at least you better not be.
Woo-hoo. Woo-hoo. We've got numb. We've got numb. Oh, that's just junk. It comes up all the time. Wandering eyes, no. No, you ain't, no. And it ain't just that, but it's part of that. If it's not lust, it's pride. That's it. You've got the doctrine of Balaam. Somebody trying to put stumbling blocks. It's not always just the enemy out there. It can be your dear beloved sister or brother. Let me tell you something. I'm going to go ahead and do it, and then I'm going to quit. Let me tell you something. Somebody in the church has done you wrong, hurt your feelings, made you mad, kicked your dog, I don't know what, done something. And you start at that moment to try to come up with a plan to get even. You're in the Balaam's doctrine. That's what you're doing. That's what we're doing. We're trying to manipulate. We're trying to put stumbling blocks in front of people so that they could falter. And that's all that Balaam told Balak to do. He couldn't curse God's people, but he could seduce God's people. God won't curse us, but he can't stop all the seductions. That's up to us. Is that making any sense at all? The doctrine of Balaam was in that church that had all this idolatry around it, and they still, to the most part, held strong. God's just saying, look, you've got some folks in there you need to get rid of. Or, not get rid of, you need to address and get this spirit out of your church. Amen? Amen. Do I go on or do I quit? I got a few more minutes if it's okay. I'll quit if you want me to, though. I'm not just saying that. If you're ready to go to sleep, let's go to at least verse 15, and then we won't get into 16 and 17, but maybe next week. But let's finish up 15. So not only did they have those that had the doctrine of Balaam, which is the doctrine of lust and pride, worldliness, but it comes in a different way. He also says, so thou hast also them that hold the doctrine of the Nicolaitans, which thing I hate. And if you'll remember back at the first church that he wrote a letter to, which was the church of Ephesus, he talked about the deeds of the Nicolaitans. That has been allowed to stay, and from deeds it's went to doctrines. We've only went a few hundred years. Do you remember what one generation tolerates, the next generation they did not deal with the deeds of the Nicolaitans. The deeds of the doctrine of the Nicolaitans is the conquering of the laity, or the conquering of the congregation. It literally means that the leaders were wanting to be lords and dominion and dictators over the congregations. That is the doctrine of the Nicolaitans. Somebody that wants to usurp authority over somebody they're not supposed to. Did that make any sense? It's kin to the spirit of Jezebel. The difference is the Jezebel spirit has a woman that deals with it, that puts a man and builds a man up and uses the man to be the pawn for her to be the authority. The Nicolaitans are anybody. They don't care. The Roman Catholic Pope would fit this. Anybody that says, I'm the Lord and you must come through me to get to Him is in the wrong spirit. You don't need me or any other minister to get to Jesus. You can do that right now. And when I try to lord my authority, I'm the authority in this particular church. But if I try to lord that over people, then I'm going in the doctrine of the Nicolaitans. And it's wrong. Can I get an amen on that? And when somebody else tries to usurp authority and to dictate what congregations do, they're in the same thing. So what you've got here is you've got two, and they work together. You've got the people of the doctrine of Balaam, which are bringing in these stumbling blocks. And then you've got the Nicolaitans that are trying to usurp authority. Anybody ever seen them old shows and comedies? Anybody here watch Three Stooges? Or anybody ever sneak up behind somebody and get down on your hands and knees, and then somebody else comes in front of them and pushes them? I ain't saying I have either. I just wondered if you all had. Let's go back to that internet thing. So what they're doing, they're working together. One of them is undermining, while the other one is oppressing. See how it works? Satan's trying to infiltrate the church. He knows that they're standing firm on faith. He knows that they're standing firm on His name. And Jesus already said, I've got a sharp two-edged sword. Wonder why He said two-edged. Wonder why He used two edges here. Because there's two different divisions that are coming in and trying to undermine the church. And Jesus is saying, look here, I've got the sword ready. I can cut both of them out of there. And if you don't get it right, I'm going to bring the sword in there and I'm going to cut it out. And that's what He wants to do. All right, would you stand? I quit. Shoot.